ሰላም ዘሪሁን ነኝ። ዛሬ Skeletal System Part Two እናያለን። በባለፈው ጊዜ Skeletal System Part One አይተናል as introduction. Today we will see about Skeletal System Part Two. So, human adult has 206 bone. As I told you in the introduction part, and adult የሆነ ሰው at least 206 ቦኖች አሉት። So the components of skeletal system is bone, cartilage, joint and ligaments are included under the skeletal system. Bone, cartilage, joint እና ligament skeletal system ውስጥ ይካተታሉ። So the skeletal system accounts 20% of the body mass. ለቃላይ በሰውነታችን ውስጥ ያለውን 20% ክብደት skeletal system cover ያደርጋል ማለት ነው። So skeletal system is bone, joint and ligament as well as the cartilage. So the bone, let us see the bone. Detailed information about bone. We can classify the skeletal system into axial bone and appendicular bone. Axial bone እና appendicular bone ብለን በሁለት እንከፍላቸዋለን። The axial bone is the bone that is found at the middle parts of the body. Mainly it is found in the head and torso, which include skull, vertebral column, thoracic cage. ስለዚህ መሃል ለመሃል ወይም ደግሞ axially ማለት is middle at the middle parts of the body የምናገኛቸው ቦኖች በአንድ ላይ axial bone እንላቸዋለን። The appendicular bones are bones which is found at the periphery parts of the body. ከሰውነታችን appendage የሆኑ የተንጠለጠሉ ቦኖች ምን እንላቸዋለን? ከመሃለኛው የቦን ክፍል የተንጠለጠሉ ወይም appendage ያደረጉ ቦኖችን appendicular bones እንላቸዋለን። So the appendicular bones are arm, leg, pelvis and shoulder bones are appendicular bones. So the bone which include the upper limb and the lower limb. Let us start from the axial skeletal system or axial bone. ከaxial bone ጀምር. The axial bones find in the head and torso, which include the skull, vertebral column and thoracic cage. Let us start with the skull. Let us start with the skull. The skull contains 20 bones. Skull 22 የሚደርሱ ቦኖችን ይዞ እናገኛለን. So we can classify the bone of the skull into cranial bone. The cranial bone is the first parts of skull bone, which is important to protect the brain. Brain protect የሚያደርግልን የስከል ቦን አይነት cranial bone እንለዋለን. The other parts of skull is facial bone. So the facial bone give structural formation of the face. They give structural formation. ፊታችን ይህን አይነት ቅርጽ እንዲኖረው የሚያደርጉ ቦኖች facial bone እንላቸዋለን. Generally, we can classify the skull into cranial bone and facial bone. So the skull contains mainly the flat bone. So the skull mainly contained the flat bone, but the facial bone of the skull is irregular bone. Each skull bones connected at suture joint. This joint is very strong joint, immobile joint, and they are very important to connect the bone of the skull. የስከልን ቦኖች ኮኔክት ያደረገልን ወይም ጆይንት ያደረገልን ጆይንት ሲቸር እንለዋለን። ይህ ሲቸር በብዛት የሚገኘው ክራኒያል ቦን ላይ እና ፌሻል ቦኖች ላይ ነው ማለት ነው። So the skull is classified as cranium as well as facial bone. Let us say the cranium, which consists of the vault and the base. The vault is a Calaverian type and the base is top down, which is found at the inferior surface of the bone. So the vault bone as well as the base bone. The vault bone, the base is divided into 3 fossa: the anterior cranial fossa, middle cranial fossa, and the posterior cranial fossa. So the base of the cranium can divide it into 3. Those cranial fossa are very important to produce the cranial cavity. The cranial cavity is the house of the brain. This ምንድነው? እነዚህ anterior cranial fossa, middle cranial fossa, posterior cranial fossa የምንላቸው they form cranial cavity form ያደርጉልናል። This cranial cavity is very important to protect the brain. ብሬንን እንደ house የብሬን መቀመጫ ክፍል ነው ማለት ነው። So the cranial fossa are found at the base of the cranium. የክራኒየሙ ቤዝ ላይ የሚገኙ ፎሳዎች ናቸው። So those are generally the cranium. When we see the facial bone, we can get the cavity that's found at the facial bone. For example, we can get the ear cavity. That is very important for the protection of ear. The orbit cavity, that is very important for protection of the eye. The nasal cavity, which is the cavity which contains the nasal canal. ስለዚህ እነዚህ ካቪቲዎች ፌሻል ቦን ላይ የምናገኛቸው ካቪቲዎች ናቸው ማለት ነው። ባዛል ላይ ያገኘናቸውን 3 ፎሳዎች ለኤግዛት ፌሻል ቦን ላይ ደግሞ እነዚህን ካቪቲዎች ማግኘት እንችላለን ማለት ነው። እያንዳንዱ ካቪቲ they contain the delicate organ, በጣም በቀላሉ የሚጎዱ ኦርጋኖችን ፕሮቴክት አድርገውልን የምናገኛቸው ካቪቲዎች ናቸው። Good. So the cavities are very important to protect the delicate organ. When we see the cranium has frontal bone, single frontal bone, the sphenoid bone, it is a 2 sphenoid bone, pair ethmoid bone, pair parietal bone, pair temporal bone, and single occipital bone. ስለዚህ frontal bone እና occipital bone single ናቸው። ሌሎቹ ግን pair ወይም ደግሞ we can get at the left and the right sides of the cranium. Generally we can get 8 cranial bone, 8 cranial boneዎችን እናገኛለን። So the cranial bone is 8. The occipital, the temporal, the parietal, the 2 parietal, the sphenoid, the ethmoidal bone, and those bones are connected by suture. እንደምንዳልኳችሁ እነዚህ ቦኖች የሚገናኙት በsuture ነው። Suture is the joint which connect the cranial bone. For example, ለምሳሌ the coronal suture which connect the parietal bone and the frontal bone. Coronal suture frontal bone እና parietal bone ያገናኝልናል. And the sagittal suture which connect the right parietal bone and the left parietal bone. sagittal suture የምንለው ሁለቶችን parietal boneዎች የሚያገናኝልን ነው right sagittal suture እና left sagittal suture I mean right parietal bone እና left parietal bone. The lambdoid sutures is very important to join the parietal bone and the occipital bone. lambdoid suture ደግሞ occipital bone እና parietal bone connect ያደርግልናል. The squamous suture is very important to connect the temporal bone and the parietal bone. parietal bone እና temporal bone connect የሚያደርግልን joint squamous suture እንለዋለን. The occipito-mastoid suture is very important to connect the occipital bone and temporal bone. temporal bone እና occipital bone የሚያገናኝልን suture ደግሞ occipito-mastoid suture እንለዋለን. ስለዚህ sutures are the joint which is found at the skull bone and very important to connect the bone of the cranium and the bone of the facial. face ላይ የሚገኙ ቦኖችንና cranial ቦኖችን እርስ በራሳቸው join እንዲያረጉ የሚያረጉልን sutures አሉ. So we have 5 types of sutures: the coronal suture, the sagittal suture, the lambdoid suture, squamous suture, as well as the occipito-mastoid suture. ስለዚህ suture ማለት ነው. Within the base of the skull, የስከል ቤዙ ላይ we can get the foramina. We have different types of foramina. What is the importance of foramina? The foramina is the hole that is very important for the passage of nerve, artery and vein. nerve, artery እና vein እንዲሄዱ የሚያረጉሉ ናቸው. ብዙ አይነት sutureዎች አሉ. The first one is the superior sphenoid suture, the rose sutures, sphinx suture የምንላቸው በርካታ sutureዎች ሆሎች አሉ ወይም ፎራሚናዎች አሉ። እነዚህ ፎራሚናዎች ነርቭ፣ አርተሪ እና ቬን ፓስ ለማድረግ የሚያገለግሉ ናቸው. The greatest or the largest foramina is the foramen magnum, foramen rotundum, foramen rosary, foramen ovale የምንላቸው ብዙ አይነት ፎራሚኖች አሉ። ነገር ግን ትልቁ foramen is the foramen magandi. This foramina magnum is important for the passage of spinal cord. spinal cord እንዲያልፍ የሚያደርግልን የፎራሚና አይነት ነው. So at the base of the skull we can get foramina. Let us see the 14 facial bones. The 40 facial bones are the mandible and the maxillary bone, which is pair maxillary bone. ሁለት maxillary bones አሉ. The zygomatic bone, which is 2. The nasal bone, which is 2. Pair nasal bone, pair lacrimal bone, pair palatine bone, and single vomer bone, and pair inferior nasal concave. pair የሆኑ inferior nasal concave. But we can get also the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is not included under the facial bone. facial bones የሚካተት አይደለም፣ ነገር ግን እንደ ሲንግል ነው። ምንም አይነት ከፌሻል ቦን ጋር ኮንጆይንትመንት ያለው ማለት ጆይን የሚያደርግ ኮኔክት የሚያደርግ ነገር የለውም። ስፔስ ላይ ተንሳፎ የሚገኝ ነው። ምንም አይነት ከቦን ጋር ምንም አይነት ጆይንትመንት የለውም። ነገር ግን አንዳንድ መጽሐፎች hyoid bone facial bone ላይ ያካትቱልናል። but the hyoid bone is one part of the axillary bone. የአግዚለሪ ቦን አንዱ ክፍል ነው። Let us see the bone which is included under the axial bone, which is the vertebral column. አንደኛው skull ነው፣ ሌላኛው vertebral column. So we have a spinal column. So we have 26 irregular bone that form a shape of the body. S አይነት ቅርጽ እንዲኖረው የሚያደርግ ሼፕ እንዲኖረው የሰው ልጅ የሚያደርጉ 26 የሚደርሱ irregular bones አሉ. Those 26 irregular bones are called vertebral bone. እነዚህን 26 irregular bones vertebral bone እንላቸዋለን. Which is very important to support everything from the skull to the pelvis. ከስከል አንስቶ እስከ pelvis ያሉትን ማንኛውንም ስትራክቸሩ ሰፖርት ያደርጉልናል. So we can divide the structure of the spine into 5 sections. በአምስት ሴክሽን መክፈል እንችላለን. የመጀመሪያው ሴክሽን the cervical vertebral. The cervical vertebral starting from C1 up to C7. That is called cervical vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae starting from T1 up to T12. The lumbar vertebral which is starting from L1 up to L5. The fourth one is the sacral vertebral and the coccygeal vertebral. So the spinal vertebral, the size of the vertebral size width ከሰርቫይካል vertebrae አንስተን ወደ lumbar vertebrae ስንመጣ እየጨመረ ይመጣል። ሳይዙ ዊድዙ እየጨመረ ይመጣል. So the fourth one is sacrum. There is a 5 bone which is fused together and give single bone which is sacrum. The fifth parts of the spine is the coccyx. The coccyx is the tail bone of the vertebrae which is found at the tip of the spinal column. የስፓይናል ኮለምን የመጨረሻ ክፍል ነች። በጣም ቲፕ ወይም ደግሞ tail of the bone እንላታለን. tail of the bone እንላታለን. The coccyx derived from 4 fused bone. ከአራት ፊውዝ ካደረጉ ቦን የምትሰራ ናት። በጣም ትንሽ ቦን ነች which is found at the tail of the spinal vertebral. ከስፓይናል vertebral tail ላይ የምናገኛት ቦን ነች. So generally those are spinal column. So structure of the spine is mainly supported by the anterior longitudinal ligament, the posterior longitudinal ligament. So those ligaments support the spinal column, and there is also intervertebral column. እንደገና intervertebral disc ምንለዋለን. This intervertebral disc is formed from the nucleus pulposus which is found at the center and the annulus fibrous which is found at the peripheral parts of intervertebral disc. So the intervertebral disc is one part of the supporting structure of the spinal column. የስፓይናል ኮለምን ስትራክቸሩ ሰፖርት የሚያደርጉልን ነገሮች ናቸው. So we have different vertebral part. የተለያዩ የቨርተብራል ፓርቶች አሉ. The vertebral has body, vertebral body አለው. The vertebral arc like lamina and pedicles. The vertebral foramen which is important for passage of spinal cord ማረፊያ ነው vertebral foramen የምንለው. And the spinal cord which is passed through the vertebral foramen, and the vertebral arc has the lamina and vertebral arc include the pedicle. ላሚና እና pedicle ባንድ ላይ ሆኖ ምን እንላቸዋለን? vertebral arc እንላቸዋለን. The other parts of the vertebra is the spinal process. The spinal process of the cervical and the transverse process. Spinal process, there is single spinal process and pair transverse process. We have also the superior articular process and inferior articular process, which is very important for articulation of rib. ከሪብ ጋር articulate ለማድረግ የሚጠቅሙ articular processes አሉ. They are two, superior articular process and inferior articular process ብለን በሁለት እንከፍላቸዋለን. Generally, those are the structure of vertebrae ክፍሎች ናቸው. Let us see the cervical vertebrae. The cervical vertebrae is starting from C1 up to C7. But the cervical vertebrae has a straight line spinal process. Spinal process straight horizontal line form ያደርጋል. Thus have the larger vertebral foramen. And the transverse foramen accommodate the artery. The transverse foramen of the cervical vertebrae, which is very important for accommodate the artery. Arterioች ለማለፍ የሚያገለግሉ ናቸው. Thus have long and the thoracic vertebrae. The thoracic vertebrae has long spinal process pointing downward. And the thoracic vertebrae also has the demi-fist, which contain the rib. Rib መጥቶ አታች የሚያደርግበት demi-fist ምንለው አሉት. When we see the lumbar vertebrae has a pedicle and lamina, which are short and thick. የሉምባር vertebrae ላይ የሚገኙ ፔዲክል እና ላሚኒዎች ምንድናቸው? ሾርት እና ቲክ ናቸው። ስለዚህ ሉምባር vertebrae፣ cervical፣ thoracic vertebraeዎችን እያንዳንዳቸው የምንለየው በሚኖራቸው spinal process ፔዲክል እና demi-fist size ነው ማለት ነው። When we see other parts of this axial bone, which is the thoracic cage, the thoracic cage contain the sternum, rib and costal cartilage. Sternum, rib and costal cartilage, they are included under the thoracic cage. When we see the sternum has the sternum, which is found at the middle parts of the thoracic cage. በዋናነት sternum የሚገኘው የደረት አጥንት ምንለው ማለት ነው። የደረታችን መሃል ለመሃል የሚገኝ አጥንት ነው ወይም ቦን ነው። So sternum contain the maneuver, the body and the xiphoid process. ሶስት ክፍሎች አሉት: maneuver, body and xiphoid process. When you see the rib, there are 12 pairs of rib. 12 pairs of rib. They are counting from superior to inferior. And we can classify the 12 pairs of the rib into true ribs. To say true ribs, the rib should directly, the costal cartilage of the rib should attach directly to the sternum. So rib 1 up to rib 7 is the true rib. ስለዚህ ከስተርነም ጋር directly connect የሚያደርጉ ሪቦችን ምን እንላቸዋለን? true rib እንላቸዋለን። The other types of ribs are false rib. ሌሎቹ ደግሞ false rib ምንላቸው አሉ። The false rib are the rib which is rib 8 up to rib 12. They are called false rib. But rib 8 up to 10, they doesn't directly attach to the sternum. ከስተርነም ጋር ምንም አይነት ዳይሬክት አታችመንት የላቸውም። ነገር ግን rib 8 up to 10 attach indirectly to the sternum by the costal cartilage to the cartilage from the rib above. ስለዚህ indirectly ከስተርነም ጋር አታች የሚያደርጉትን ደግሞ false rib እንላቸዋለን። The rest two ribs, that is rib 11 and rib 12, they are called floating rib. እነዚህ የሚንሳፈፉ ሪቦች ማለት ናቸው። እነዚህ ሪቦች ሪብ 11 and 12 they doesn't have any attachment with the sternum directly ይሁን indirectly ከስተርነም ጋር ምንም አይነት attachment የላቸውም። ስለዚህ ምን እንላቸዋለን? floating rib እንላቸዋለን። floating rib. So the ribs are flat bone. The ribs are flat bone. For example, rib 1 up to 7, those are longer and going from 1 to 7, and the fourth ribs are shorter rib. እነዚህ rib 8 up to 12 short rib ናቸው። ከአንድ እስከ 7 ደግሞ rib ብለን የምንጠራቸው ናቸው ማለት ነው። Generally, the axial bones are skull, vertebral column, and thoracic skin. Let us see the appendicular bone. The appendicular bone is the bone of the limb, which include arm and leg bones, pelvic bone, and shoulder bone. እነዚህ appendicular bone እንላቸዋለን። ስለዚህ let us start from pectoral girdle. ከpectoral girdle እንጀምር። The pectoral girdle is the shoulder bone which include clavicle and scapula. clavicle እና scapulan ያካትትልናል። So the clavicle and the scapula is categorized under the pectoral girdle ወይም ደግሞ ምን እንላቸዋለን? The shoulder bone. Very important to attach the upper limb to the axial skeleton. The only bone which attach the appendicular bone to axial skeleton. appendicular skeletonን ከaxial skeleton ጋር attach የሚያደርግልን the only bone clavicle ነው። ወይም ደግሞ በሌላ አነጋገር pectoral girdle ናቸው ማለት ነው። So the clavicle has directly joined with the sternum by the sternal end. So the clavicle has sternal end and acromial end. clavicle ምን አላት? sternal end እና acromial end ምንለው አለ። And the scapula has also the thin flat bone. Scapula is a thin flat bone and it has roughly triangular like shape. ልክ triangle ነው የሚመስለው። scapula triangle የሚመስል bone ነው and it is thin flat bone. So it included under flat bone. So the scapula has 3 border, the superior top border, the middle or vertebral or inner border, and the lateral or axillary or outer border. ስለዚህ scapula 3 ቦርደሮች አሉ። superior border, medial border and lateral border ብለን በ3 መክፈል እንችላለን። Let us see the bone of upper limb. The bone of upper limb can be divided as 3 parts. The arm, forearm and the hand. Arm, forearm and hand. So arm, forearm and hands are called upper limb. በተለምዶ we can call that the upper limb is arm. arm እንለዋለን። ነገር ግን arm is the first parts of the upper limb. It is not the whole things are arm. ሁሉም ነገር arm ብለን አንጠራው። So what bones is found in the arm? The humerus is the arm bone. The humerus is arm bone and the proximal parts of the humerus has the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle. And the middle parts of the humerus contain the radial groove, which is important for passage of radial artery and radial nerve. radial artery እና radial nerve የሚሄዱበት ክፍል radial groove እንለዋለን። The distal part has the medial epicondyle, the lateral epicondyle, and the coronoid fossa, the radial fossa, the trochlea and the capitulum. those structures are find the distal parts of the humor. When we see the forearm bones, we can get two bones, the ulna bone and radius bone. አልናና ራዲየስ ቦን ደግሞ ፎርአርምን ፎርም አድርገው እናገኛቸዋለን። So the two bones are interconnected with the two bones, the ulna bone and the radius bones are interconnected with the connective tissue which is called interosseous membrane. The interosseous membrane is the membrane which is very important for connect the ulna and radius. አልናና ራዲየስን ኮኔክት ያደረጉልን ክፍሎች interosseous membrane እንለዋለን። When we see the ulna has olecranon fossa, the coronoid process, olecranon fossa, proximal parቱን ፎርም አድርገው እናገኛለን። When we see the radius, has head, the radial tuberosity, and the radial styloid process. The head, radial tuberosity, and the radial styloid. Let us see the final parts of the upper limb, which is hand. The hand has bone, which is carpal bone, 8 carpal bone. 8 carpal bone አሉ, that is scaphoid, the lunate, the trichotram, the pisiforms are the 4 bone which is found at the proximal row of the carpal bone. At the distal row of the carpal bone we can get trapezium, the trapezoid, the capitate and the hamate. So trapezium, trapezoid, ካፕቴት ሃሜት እነዚህ ዲስታል ሮ ላይ የምናገኛቸው ካርፓል ቦኖች ናቸው። ፒሲፎርም፣ ትሪኮትረም፣ ሉኔት እና ስካፎይድ ደግሞ they are found at the proximal parts of the carpal bone. The second parts of the hand is metacarpal bone. The metacarpal bone is the bone which is found at the middle parts of the hand, and the number of metacarpal bones are 5. Metacarpal 1, metacarpal 2, metacarpal 3, and metacarpal 4. The final one is metacarpal 5. The rest are phalanges. We can divide the phalanges as proximal phalanges, middle phalanges, and distal phalanges. ቀሪዎቹ phalanges ናቸው 14 ቦን የሚደርሱ there are 40 bones of phalanges። እነዚህን በሶስት መክፈል እንችላለን። proximal phalanges, middle phalanges and distal phalanges ብለን በሶስት እንከፍላቸዋለን። except the thumb. The thumb doesn't have middle phalanges. The thumb has no the middle phalanx. So the thumb doesn't have the middle phalanx. That means the thumb has 2 phalanx, the proximal phalanx and distal phalanx. Proximal phalanx እና distal phalanx እንጂ middle phalanx የለው። ሌሎቹ ግን ቀሪ አራቶቹ 3 ምን አላቸው? 3 phalanxዎች አሉት። ያ ማለት proximal phalanges, middle እና distal phalanges አሏቸው ማለት ነው። በአጠቃላይ arm, forearm and hand bones are included under upper limb bone. The other parts of appendicular bones are pelvis bone. So the pelvic girdle attach the lower limb to the axial skeleton. Like that of appendicular girdle, the pelvic girdle attach the lower limb to the axial skeleton. pelvic girdle lower limb ከአግዚያል skeleton ጋር አታች ያደርግልናል። Let us see the pelvic girdle. The pelvic girdle is formed from sacrum and hip bone. sacrum እና hip bone ነው ፎርም የተደረገው። The hip bone is mainly formed from 3 major bones: ilium, ischium, and pubis. ከኢሊየም ሂፕ ቦን ፎርም የተደረጉት ከሶስት ቦኖች ፊውዝ ሆነው ከሶስት ቦን ነው ፊውዝ የሆነው ከኢሊየም ከኢሺየም እና ከፑቢስ ቦን ፎርም ሆኖ እናገኘዋለን። The other parts of the lower limb is thigh, leg, and foot. Like that of upper limb appendicular skeleton, we can divide the lower limb appendicular skeleton as thigh, leg, and foot. Let us start from the thigh. The thigh bones, the major thigh bone is femur. The femur is the largest bone of the body. ሰውነታችን ውስጥ ከሚገኙ ትልቁና ከባዱ ቦን femur እንለዋለን. So the femur has it is the largest bone in the body, and the femur has the head and the fovea capitis, which is proximal parts of the femur, and the femur has also greater trochanter and lesser trochanter. So the proximal parts of the femur contain the fovea capitis, head, the lesser trochanter, the greater trochanter, and the intertrochanteric crust. እነዚህን proximal parts of femur ላይ እናገኛቸዋለን. When we see the middle parts of the femur, we can get the gluteal tuberosity. The gluteal tuberosity is located at the middle parts of the femur, and the linea aspera also find at the middle parts of the femur. When we see the distal parts of the femur, we can get the medial epicondyle, the medial condyle, the lateral epicondyle, and the lateral condyle. እነዚህን ደግሞ ዲስታል ፌመር ላይ የምናገኛቸው ስትራክቸሮች ናቸው. And intercondylar fossa, the patella, which is found at the anterior, also included under the femur. Let us see the leg. The leg has, like that of the forearm, the leg has 2 bones, the fibula and tibia. ልክ እንደ forearm leg ሁለት ቦኖች አሉት፣ fibula እና tibia. Fibula and tibia included under the leg. Let us start from the tibia, but before that, the fibula and the tibia interconnected by interosseous membrane. This interosseous membrane is the connective tissue membrane which connect the fibula and tibia. The tibia has the medial condyle and the lateral condyle proximally, and intercondylar eminence also find at the proximal part that's found between the lateral condyle and the medial condyle. The tibial tuberosity is found in the anterior parts of the tibia, and the medial parts of the tibia contain the anterior border, the sharp border of the tibia, which is called tibial sharp or anterior border of the tibia. The distal parts of the tibia is mainly formed from the medial malleolus and the fibular notch. So the medial malleolus and the fibular notch is formed they are found the distal parts of the tibia. The fibula is mainly formed the lateral malleolus. ስለዚህ medial malleolusን ፎርም ያደርግልን ቲቢያ ነው። lateral malleolusን ደግሞ ፎርም የሚያደርግልን ፊቡላ ይሆናል ማለት ነው። malleolus በአማርኛ ቁርጭምጭሚት የምንለው ማለት ነው። Let us see the structure of the foot. The foot has tarsus bone or tarsal bone. The tarsus bone, there are 7 tarsus bone. The first 2 largest bones are the talus and calcaneus. Talus እና calcaneus ናቸው. So calcaneus and the talus, they form the ankle joint. ታለስ እና ካልካነስ ከራዲያል ከፊቡላር እና ከቲቪያል ቦን ጋር ሆነው ምን ፎርም ያደርጉልናል? አንክል ጆይንትን ፎርም ያደርጉልናል። The other parts of the foot are the cuboidal bone, the navicular bone, and the three cuneiform bones, the intermediate cuneiform, the medial cuneiform, and the lateral cuneiform. They form the middle parts of the foot. የፉትን middle part form የሚያደርጉልን cuboidal bone, lateral cuneiform, medial cuneiform, and intermediate cuneiform. They form the middle parts of the foot. The hind foot ምንለዋል ይሄ ወደ ኋላ ያለውን ወይም heel form የሚያደርግልን የቦኖች ግን ሁለት ናቸው። the calcaneus and the talus. mainly calcaneus form የሚያደርግልን heel ወይም ደግሞ hind parts of the foot የምንለው. The talus is mainly connect with tibia and fibula. ታለስ በቀጥታ ከቲቪያ እና ከፊቡላ ጋር ነው አታች የሚያደርገው። The forearm, I mean the front bones of the foot are metatarsal, like that of metacarpal bone. There we can get 5 metatarsal bones. Metatarsal bone 1, metatarsal 2, 3, 4 and 5. አምስት metatarsal bones እናገኛለን። Like that of the phalanges of the hand, ልክ እጃችን ላይ እንዳየናቸው የphalanges አይነቶች the foot phalanges has also proximal phalanges, middle phalanges and distal phalanges ብለን በሶስት መክፈል እንችላለን. except the great toe or the hallux. except the hallux ወይም ደግሞ except the great toe, the rest has proximal, middle and distal phalanges. ለምሳሌ ታምብ ሁለት phalanges ነው ያሉት proximal እና distal phalanges. like that of the thumb, the great toe or the hallux has also 2 phalanges, the proximal phalanges and the distal phalanges. በአጠቃላይ ዛሬ skeletal systemን በሁለት ሜጀር ፓርት ከፍለን አይተናል። በባለፈው በቦን የቅርጽ አይነት ሎንግ ቦን፣ ሾርት ቦን፣ ፍላት ቦን፣ ኢሬጉላር ቦን ብለን ከፋፍለን አይተን ነበር። የዛሬው ግን የስኬለተን ሲስተምን በሁለት ከፍለን አይተናል። አፔንዲኩላር ስኬለተን እና አክዛይል ስኬለተን ብለን ባላቸው ፖዚሽን ከፍለን ሞር ዲቴይል አይተናል። ሰላማችሁ ይብዛ። መልካም ጊዜ